Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. The chief scientist of Operation Warp Speed says he's confident that a few million doses of a CCP virus vaccine will reach the public this year. As tension builds over reopening plans, locals in some counties in Pennsylvania are taking a risk. They're defying their governor despite the consequences. The Commerce Department is closing a loophole that allowed Huawei to sidestep U.S. export restrictions and get advanced U.S. technology. The regime is unhappy and threatening retaliation. Internal documents from China obtained by NTD reveal the why behind the regime's cover-up of the virus's origin. They're protecting state secrets. And the world's largest chip maker will build a $12 billion factory in Arizona. It's the boost for the economy and will also help ensure key national defense technology is manufactured in the U.S. People may be able to get their hands on a CCP virus vaccine in record time through Operation Warp Speed. The chief scientist of the program says he's confident he'll be able to deliver a few 100 million doses by the end of the year.
The chief scientist of Operation Warp Speed gave an optimistic speech on Friday, saying he felt confident that a vaccine would make it to the public this year.
In fact, Mr. President, I have very recently seen early data from a clinical trial with a coronavirus vaccine. And these data made me feel even more confident that we will be able to deliver a few 100 million doses of vaccine by the end of 2020.
The doctor sits on the board of Moderna, a U.S. company that's testing a possible CCP virus vaccine. Out of 100 candidates, President Trump said government experts selected 14 they believe have the best chance at succeeding. And they will be manufactured even as they undergo clinical trials.
It's expensive, but we'll be saving massive amounts of time. We'll be saving years if we do this properly, and that's what we're doing. So we're gearing up on the assumption that we'll have, in the near future, relatively near future, a vaccine.
Health Secretary Alex Azar backed up Slowy, calling him arguably the world's most experienced and successful vaccine developer. Vaccines often take 10 to 15 years to be developed, so if all goes well, the CCP virus vaccine could be finished in a remarkable 1 year.
Today, senior military leaders unveiled the first ever flag of the United States Space Force. This is the newest branch of the U.S. military, and it aims to protect the country's assets and interests in space.
The United States Space Force flag was unveiled to the president in the Oval Office on Friday. The Space Force is the newest addition to the U.S. military, formed in 2019. One of the senior officials went over the meaning of the flag.
The Delta in the middle is a symbol that the space community has used for years and years and years. The North Star signifies our core value, our guiding light, if you will. And the orbit around the globe signifies the space capabilities that fuel our American way of life and our American way of war.
Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said there are adversaries who are turning space into a hostile environment, so the Space Force and Space Command are meant to protect U.S. assets and interests in space. President Trump said Space Force should have been formed sooner.
As you know, China, Russia, perhaps others started off a lot sooner than us. We should have started this a long time ago, but we've made up for it in spades.
After the flag was presented, the president signed the 2020 Armed Forces Day proclamation. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
And New York is starting to open up again. Governor Cuomo announcing today that some regions have the green light. People can even go to some of the beaches.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced today that 5 of New York's 10 regions are opening up. The rest of the state, including New York City, will remain on pause until at least May 28th. But New York will join its neighboring states in opening beaches for Memorial Day weekend.
The agreement is New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware will all be opening beaches for the Memorial Day weekend.
That means New Yorkers won't have to travel to neighboring states and can enjoy the beaches close to home this weekend. But social distancing will remain mandatory for beachgoers. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said on Friday that from now on, the NYPD won't focus on disrupting small gatherings anymore. Instead, they'll center their efforts on helping the people by handing out face masks, for example.
But we're not going to have the NYPD focused on, 2 people together or 3 people together. We're going to focus on when it starts to be more than a handful of people.
But he said the NYPD works to protect and save lives, adding that big gatherings pose a big risk to those who are most vulnerable.
Tension continues to build about how and when to reopen states. Just about all 50 states have started their reopening plans, but some aren't there yet. And governors are facing pushback from all angles. NTD's Melina Weisskopf spoke to an official who is defying his governor's orders.
Pennsylvania has seen fewer cases over the past 14 days, in line with federal reopening guidelines. Still, the state governor is enforcing strict restrictions in some areas, but some are moving forward anyway.
We prefer to work in cooperation with the governor, but we intend to move forward with a plan to restore Lancaster County.
He says Lancaster County has a comprehensive plan, including testing all nursing home residents and staff, and watching the hospital capacity closely. So far, they've only used around 20 of the 170 ventilators they have. Still, the county is locked down, and the economic impact has been devastating. Parsons says there must be a middle way.
And, we want a balance between, the health aspects and taking care of vulnerable people, but also having the personal freedom to get back to work and support our families.
A county close by has similar wishes. York County has the go-ahead to partly reopen starting next Friday, but personal care and entertainment still have to stay closed. Some businesses are reopening anyways.
We're following all the guidelines, This is how you get back. Squash the fear, The fear has consumed us all.
And their county commissioner says the people can handle it well.
We will survive this crisis with compassion, wisdom, humility, and the understanding that we are all imperfect, but we all strive to accomplish the greatest of good for each other and our Commonwealth.
Earlier this week, the governor threatened to withhold federal funding from the counties who don't comply with his order to stay closed. As Trump visited a warehouse there yesterday, he expressed his concern about the matter.
You have areas of Pennsylvania that are barely affected, and they want to keep them closed. Can't do that.
Meanwhile, Governor Wolf says his reopening plan is gradual and prioritizes public safety. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And the Pennsylvania governor is taking a similar stance towards restaurants as California, saying they can face losing their liquor license if they don't comply with the timing of his reopening plan. And there's a new guidance for schools and workplaces on how to reopen safely. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued 6 pages of checklists and things to consider.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released guidance on Thursday to help schools and child care centers safely reopen. They also cover workplaces, camps, mass transit systems, as well as bars and restaurants. The guidance is laid out as a decision tree, offering yes or no scenarios that in most cases lead to one of 3 outcomes: open and monitor, do not open, or meet safeguards first. The CDC document is also meant to help business owners develop policies. It advises the wearing of masks to work in most cases, as is already recommended in enclosed public spaces. It also encourages business owners to coordinate with state and local health officials when making decisions about safety. This latest guidance relates to another earlier set of guidelines released by the Trump administration on April 17th. President Trump said at the time that governors would be empowered to tailor an approach suitable for the individual needs of their state. The CDC said it may issue more guidance as needed to help states as they start to reopen businesses.
The Trump administration is closing a loophole that allows China's telecom giant Huawei to get around U.S. trade restrictions and get its hands on advanced U.S. technology. But the Chinese regime is angry and is threatening retaliation.
The Chinese regime is threatening retaliation after the U.S. closed a loophole, one that allowed Huawei to sidestep U.S. export controls and buy semiconductors from global chip makers. Last year, the Trump administration put restrictions on U.S. companies selling to Huawei. The president didn't want advanced U.S. technology powering the Chinese military, which Huawei is linked to. But the telecom giant found a way around the rule. Instead of buying directly from U.S. companies, It would just buy from overseas manufacturers who are licensed to use US technology in their chips. That won't be so easy anymore, though. All global chip makers will need to obtain a US license before selling to Huawei, and most manufacturers rely on equipment produced by US companies. So China's not happy. It's threatening to cause trouble for US companies like Apple, Cisco, and Boeing. Huawei needs semiconductors for its smartphones. It's now the second largest manufacturer in the world. It also needs the chips to power its 5G ambitions. President Trump, though, has been telling allies to exclude Huawei gear from their 5G networks because its equipment could be used by China for spying. The new restrictions come amid heightened tensions between Washington and Beijing, triggered by what the U.S. calls the regime's mishandling of the pandemic.
Slovenia is the first European country to declare an end to the epidemic, while Norway is likely to keep travel restrictions on until August.
The Slovenian government has announced an official end to its virus pandemic. Authorities confirmed less than 7 new virus cases each day for the past 2 weeks. The decision makes it the first European country to bring an end to the health crisis, even though it's a direct neighbour to hard-hit Italy. Norway, on the other hand, will likely maintain travel restrictions until August 20th. But the government may decide to loosen some restrictions earlier. Travel between other Nordic countries may be allowed by mid-June, while travellers from other European countries may be allowed to enter by late July. Brazilian Health Minister Nelson Teich resigned on Friday after just weeks on the job. Nelson Teich is the second health minister to resign amid the pandemic in Brazil. Last week he said he was not consulted before President Bolsonaro issued a partial reopening for some of the country's businesses. And some 250 medical workers performed a flash mob synchronized dance in the Belgian city of Liège on Friday. Participants decided to perform the dance to raise awareness about their difficult working conditions and the government's virus response.
And coming up next, internal government documents from China reveal why the regime is refusing to be transparent about the origin of the virus. That and more when we return.
%90 of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Internal government documents reveal why the Chinese regime is refusing to be transparent on the virus's origin. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
Internal government documents obtained by NTD show the communist regime is using the excuse of protecting state secrets to prevent virus information from getting to the outside world. A February 13th notice from Nanning Municipal Government tells all authorities to resolutely prevent the loss of confidential information during the epidemic prevention and control period. So what is confidential information? The regime says it refers to all kinds of emergency documents, emergency communications, and emergency events. It adds internal sensitive information must first be approved by relevant authorities before being disclosed to the public. The whole world is looking for more information on the virus, but under the internal government notice, this information is a state secret and cannot be disclosed. The notice goes on to forbid anyone from distributing such information through digital channels like email or WeChat. It also forbids mentioning state secrets through phone calls and text messages or while at home. It's also forbidden to copy or scan sensitive documents outside the office. The notice also states the secret carriers, like computers or documents, must be managed by dedicated personnel. Even cleaning, disinfecting, and opening windows for ventilation are not allowed during this period. Media interviews are also forbidden without getting approval first. It's been 4 days since Wuhan began its 10-day initiative to test all 11 million residents. One angry resident reportedly called the mayor's hotline and called the entire initiative nuts. On a video uploaded to YouTube, she says that so many people gathering in one place is ridiculous.
Do you know that we don't normally go out? Then you suddenly asked us all to go out, get together and line up since 8 a.m. And we still couldn't get tested. We've been waiting for 3 hours. Our kid hadn't been out for a few months. Now our kid has to get tested too. What on earth are you thinking?
She believes the way the testing is carried out makes cross-infection very possible.
During the testing process, you have to take off your mask and open your mouth. With so many people to see to, how can the medical staff have time to change gloves and disinfect? People there are coughing and sneezing. The air is contaminated. How can you clean the area so quickly?
She says the whole thing is nuts.
You didn't even consider these problems and just ask more than 10 million people to do this test. I call it nuts. You're recording, right? Tell the relevant departments that I call the decision nuts.
And it's not just this incident. Her and her friends say the authorities are completely incapable.
A 21-year-old Hong Kong lifeguard, the first anti-government protester to plead guilty to rioting during last year's unrest, was sentenced to 4 years in jail today.
Sin Kai-ho was among thousands who surrounded the Legislative Council on June 12 last year in a bid to stop legislators from giving a second reading to a since-withdrawn bill that would have allowed extraditions to mainland China. A few dozen protesters, many wearing black and holding a banner reading, "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times," gathered outside the court, chanting, "There's no riot, only tyranny."
Our fellow protesters didn't come out for themselves, and he came out for Hong Kong. He didn't do anything wrong. So why was the sentencing so harsh? It's not reasonable, because there's a problem with society and the entire system. And the young people gave us a lot and sacrificed a lot.
As Sin was driven away in a van, some protesters knocked on the windows and shouted, "Stay strong."
I think even a day is too long for them. Why? Because there's a problem with society and the entire system. And the young people gave us a lot and sacrificed a lot.
The only person so far to plead guilty, Sin admitted to pushing police barricades and hurling umbrellas at officers. More than 8,300 protesters were arrested between June 2019 and mid-May this year. Over 1,600 have been prosecuted and 595 face rioting charges.
We obtained internal documents showing local officials inflated China's GDP. The real economic picture there is worse than imagined. NTD's Catherine Wen reports. China's economic data has long been questioned by economists and investors. We obtained internal documents that shows one city significantly overstating its numbers. The leaked files come from Xinjiang City in the northwestern Shanxi province. In early May, the city released its first quarter GDP numbers, including details for its 13 subdivisions called counties or districts. In China, local governments submit economic data to their higher-ups. Comparing the internal data we obtained from the counties with what the city told the public shows the city significantly exaggerated its numbers. Take Sanyuan as an example. The county reported a 1.7 billion yuan first quarter GDP, but the city published 3.7 billion yuan, more than double the original number. The city also overreported two other counties' GDP by about 300 million to 400 million yuan. In total, the GDP for the three counties' first quarter was inflated by about 60%. That equals 2.7 billion yuan, or around $500 per person more. The official numbers themselves also don't add up. Due to the economic hit from the virus, only one county recorded positive growth, meaning most of their economies shrank. Yet 9 of the 13 counties' GDP figures are higher than last year's. GDP growth is an important target in Chinese economic policy, and local officials have strong incentive to inflate the numbers for political gain. The Chinese National Bureau of Statistics says the national economic data is also regularly reported to international organizations including the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. Economists have pointed out that China's economic data is not reliable and the situation is worse than official data. Chinese officials said in April the country's economy shrank nearly 7% in the first quarter. But as the leaked files reveal, the damage from the pandemic could be much greater. Reuters reports. Due to rising tension between the U.S. and China, HSBC on Tuesday lowered its estimate for Chinese GDP growth this year from 3% to 1.7%. The world's largest chip maker will build a $12 billion factory in Arizona. It's a boost for the economy and will also ensure some key national defense technology is manufactured in the U.S.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
The world's largest chip maker, Taiwan Semiconductor, plans to build a factory in the U.S. It's a win for the Trump administration and its efforts to wrestle supply chains away from China. The build will bolster national security and create 1,600 new jobs.
The U.S. has secured a win as it wrestles supply chains back from China. Taiwan Semiconductor, the world's largest chipmaker, will build a $12 billion factory in Arizona, creating 1,600 jobs over 9 years. The company also plans to bring its 8 key suppliers with them. It will produce state-of-the-art 5mm chips. The chips are used in key areas of national security like artificial intelligence, 5G base stations, and even F-35 fighter jets. Vast majority of the world's most advanced chips are made in Asia. This has caused concern among U.S. officials as a strategic rivalry with China deepens. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo writing on Twitter today that this deal bolsters U.S. national security at a time when China is trying to dominate cutting-edge tech and control critical industries. He also said the deal strengthens America's relationship with Taiwan, calling it a vibrant democracy and force for good in the world. Taiwan is a self-ruling island off the coast of China. The Chinese Communist Party has vowed to annex it and make it part of the mainland. Construction of the Arizona facility is set to begin in 2021, with production targeted to start in 2024.
U.S. retail sales experienced record declines for the second straight month as CCP virus worries continue to keep Americans at home. But online merchants report an increase in sales. Here are today's business briefs.
U.S. retail sales endured a second straight month of record declines in April as the CCP virus pandemic kept Americans at home. Retail sales plunged 16.4% last month, the biggest decline since the government started tracking the series in 1992. But online merchants report an increase in receipts. They saw sales jump 8.4%. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow floated the idea of cutting the corporate tax rate in half for U.S. companies who bring their operations back from other countries. He wants to drop the rate from 21% to 10.5%. Kudlow says it's just an idea right now, but that it would make the country more inviting to investors and more competitive in the marketplace. As Israel's economy slowly returns to normal with the easing of its lockdown, the once vibrant diamond exchange floor in Tel Aviv remains shut. The city's diamond district is one of the world's main trade and polishing centers. It's deserted under the virus pandemic, and the diamond sector has lost about $300 million in profit. As an alternative to in-person sales, the World Federation of Diamond Bourses launched a not-for-profit website called Get Diamonds. It now has an inventory of $5.5 billion in diamonds, which it says is the biggest in the world.
Coming up, a 14-year-old boy from France figured out a way to help healthcare workers during the virus pandemic. See how he's using technology to make their work safer after the break. Months after the beginning of the outbreak, France's healthcare staff still lack masks. But one 14-year-old boy has found a way to help. Our France correspondent David Vives has the story.
It looks more like a factory than a teenager's room. This is where Romeo Estezet does his part to help the healthcare workers of Paris.
There are 4 printers. The one I've had for my mom since 6th grade, the one I borrowed from a high school, one that belongs to my friend, and one we could afford to buy with money from donations.
A few years ago, Romeo started to build a car. When he heard the hospitals lack masks, he thought he might be able to help. He searched for a template for protective visors online and started printing.
The printer's head melts polylactic acid filaments and it goes into printers that print multiple layers. It's the same as 2D printers.
A transparent sheet and a few tweaks later.
We make the head holders, then we clip this, et voilà. 3D printing is my passion. At first my mom said, "But what are you going to do with that?" Now she's changed her mind.
And in the living room, the communications office with Romeo's mum.
I can barely turn a machine on and off. Technical parts are for Romeo. I'm supervising all orders coming in.
As soon as the first visors were given away, the orders never stopped coming in. Hospitals, drugstores, bakeries, teachers and healthcare workers from Paris ask him for visors. He eventually created a group called 3D for Better to collect funds for his visors, which he gives away for free. First stop of the day, the hospital. The director welcomes them warmly.
Our healthcare workers said they're really comfortable and very useful. It really gives face protection for nurses or any person in contact with the public. It provides extra safety. I'm very proud of Romeo. His passion led him to do something very positive. It makes sense to see that we can help each other. We changed our minds about staying home and became very active.
Julie said she had orders of thousands of visors, but she hopes that other people or even factories can help. Romeo and his mum have made and delivered 1,800 visors so far. They hope to continue for as long as they can. Reporting by David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in.